Good evening, colleagues across town and across the globe. This is January 14, 2021, and here is another exciting segment of Public Affairs Public Access, hosted by yours truly, Paul Colby, a wild man if ever there was one. And not only Paul Colby, the host, but several guests who are among my finest investigators. I'd like to introduce to you some of the people who do the hard work of digging into the fact basis. Well, I'm going to coin a new term there, the fact basis, to celebrate, if you will, the end of an era, that is to say, the Trump era, and the beginning of something that will follow the Trump era. We really don't know what it is yet, but some of my investigators have a pretty good idea. One that you may know from his reputation is Ed Hominem. Ed has been doing a lot of work in a lot of mediums for a long time. He has been lecturing, if you did not know, on rugby in the animal kingdom. That is fascinating to me. He's also the host of an online blog, Digestive Politics in the Age of Self-Help TikTok Videos. And to put it in very simple terms, he is known as a real Washington insider. And Ed, I have this opportunity right now, since we're both on TV together, to ask you what that means to be a real Washington insider.
Well, boss, it's fairly simple. I actually haven't been outside the house since the early days of the second Nixon administration, but I've built up a my patio. I've converted into a fishbowl type thing, complete with sunken ships and treasure chests, and I have an excellent assistant researcher named Feline that goes out and does a lot of the investigating for me.
I've seen some of Feline's work on YouTube, or
And
maybe it, yeah, yeah.
she's been around for a long time. It's almost like she's had 6 or 7 separate lives. She's done so many things in her career in Washington, but I digress.
I think maybe I've seen her on You Hawley, but I could be imagining that. There's so many of these new channels popping up lately. Anyway, here's another friend of mine who has not always been one of my investigators. She's had so many different careers, but she's working for me now. That would be Andromeda. You might remember that she won a Nobel Prize in 2015 in industrial semantics. I'm
Yep,
not
that was me.
sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm not sure what that is. She is the inventor of the Jane Sprank hairstyle.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and she's a consultant to the stationary airline industry. And by the way, I have at least 7 of your cookbooks, Anne, and
Oh, good.
yes, and I've read some of them, but they're mostly here to entertain some of my creatures, dogs and cats. But let me ask you a question about this stationary airline industry that you represent. Um, just what is a stationary airline industry?
Well, it's actually a pretty cool concept, boss. it turns out that if the plane doesn't go anywhere, you get home a lot faster and you still get the free peanuts and you still get the wine. So that's why we're able to keep costs low, because the plane doesn't go anywhere.
And I guess there are a lot of people not going anywhere right now. So this is your time, huh?
Oh yeah, this is my time to shine. You better believe I'm going to take it.
Okay. Another investigator, you've probably known him under another nom de plume because he's been doing this kind of work for a long time. I'm talking about Leo Tard, but most people know him by his nickname, Big Lee. Sometimes I talk to Big Lee about private problems, but mostly I talk to him about what's going on in the world because he is a professor of applied applications at North California's I can never say that right. North California's University, but you know him probably because one of his books is right now in the top 10 list, New York Times bestseller. It is called A Normal Person's Guide to Normal Situations. So some of you may have use for that. And he's an erstwhile director of the People's Alliance for Nonverbal Solutions to Underwater Disputes. And Big Lee, if you could explain to me, what is that dangerous work? I mean, have you been in situations where you're really not sure what's going to happen next? I mean, underwater?
I appreciate the question. In fact, in a dangerous situation, I prefer to say, mime over matter. So I think, you're underwater, you go with the flow. It's normal to feel pressure.
Wow. I've never heard it put that way. Of course, I don't listen to many discussions about underwater disputes, but I think I'll start paying more attention to them now. And what you should be paying attention to, dear readers and listeners, you're tuning in because you want to hear what's been going on and what's been going down. So tonight, since we are at the beginning of 2021, we want to take you on a little survey tour going way back to the election day in November and moving forward all the way to where we are now. And if we have some time after we do that, because it's going to take a while, then we'll talk about business, what it's like for business in 2021 after a really horrible year for business in 2020. But let's go back to the top of where I told you we're going to go. That is the election and the change of officers in the government. That goes way back to November. Let's start with that election day that some of you remember very distinctly. There were claims from the very beginning that there was something wrong with the voting machines that were supplied by the company called Astro Dominion. There were all sorts of allegations about bad vote counting and about silly things that were being done to the machines and some sort of intervention that was taking place after the votes were counted. Now, one of my investigators, I'm talking about Ed, of course, was able to get us a manual for the Astro Dominion voting machines. And how did you get that, Ed?
Well, it was actually Hunter Biden inadvertently had it on his laptop, and I was able to bribe the laptop repair owner. Or I was able to incentivize the laptop repair shop owner to download the manual from Hunter Biden's laptop.
That explains a lot, because there are some things in this manual that I find hard to believe. But let me tell you what I think is the gist of the problem. This will answer for you whether or not there is any validity to the charges made by, say, Trump and his allies about the use of these machines. Look at page 14 here, first slide we've got. This this little page from the manual is talking about the brain of the vote computer, and that brain is incidentally the Bram-Hurley long worm, excuse me, prompt and erase subclocker. I don't know of any machines that have a subclocker like that. I'm not sure what a subclocker is, but I have it on good authority that this is the basis for all of the complaints. I know that it installs a chip in every voter. So
But also, boss, I think you might want to look at page 28 as well. I think there's some important information.
let's look at
you
that
can
slide, page 28. This discusses the lookup. This is a lockout tube, spinner, and semiconductor hover mechanism. And it says here that it's removed and replaced between elections. Now that's pretty suspicious, isn't it? And it says also, it says you can't really trust the accuracy of the data, and that nobody but a service person should try to get in that machine. So maybe that's it.
No. I think you have to skip ahead 10 pages to the dress down irrigator Zen parsing unit.
Okay, we've got that slide, don't we, boss? Mr. Producer, I'm the boss here. Yeah, okay. The dress down irrigator Zen parsing unit. That has access to the side view packets. That does sound awfully suspicious. I know that muddled.
Let me just interrupt you here, boss. Let me tell you something. The real stuff is on page 122. If we can, do you have a slide?
Do we have a slide for that?
The floor subtraction control center in Virginia? Because
this is talking about all of the non-local approximation. I know what that is from quantum physics. Non-local means not here.
Yeah, and yeah, it says the permutations are not recorded, so there's no evidence of phantom or irregular maintenance, but this does not guarantee that the manifest will retain its original verbal syntaxes. And I think what's really important about that here is that I have no idea what they're talking about, and I think that's the real conspiracy here.
Well, it's actually based, I believe this is based on entabulator technology from the 70s and 80s. So I think this is an excellent slide to represent exactly the evolution of technology from the entabulator to this sophisticated device we're seeing here.
Well, on the basis of these 4 pages from the manual, I'm more confused than ever about whether this machine is counting votes or learning things, artificial intelligence, learning things from people, but I don't think I would trust it. So let me leave that behind for right now. One of the charges made early, right after Election Day, was that people were moving to battleground states. In other words, they were moving there to vote. And we've got a slide here. There was a review in History Now, which said that basically people moving from Pennsylvania, moving to Pennsylvania and Michigan could not be explained by population scientists. It looks like people just showed up, and then they, according to the theory, they cast votes for the incoming Biden administration. But one thing that's bothered me, if they brought all of these people in from other states, then where did they stay?
Patron, in Paris, we say that the vote is like a bungee. Sometimes she goes to extreme and then poof, is no more. And other times they come back.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. One of my investigators who's not here sent me a picture, and you can see it for yourself. There are these dome-like structures. I'm not going to tell you exactly where they are, but that's apparently where they hid a bunch of these or where these voters lived for some period of time before they came here to vote in these battleground states and then went back later on.
What's interesting, boss, about these is the the different shapes that they use. Some are geodesic domes, and I think you can see in the background, some are actually modeled on the ancient pentathlon from Athens, Greece. And they apparently the voters stayed there and lived temporarily, but there were no bathrooms, so eventually they had to vacate the premises.
Huh. I thought the pentathlon was one of those new sports stadiums, but I'm glad you corrected me on that. There's another thing that was being discussed back. That's one of your sources, isn't it, Ed?
Yes, it is.
We don't usually see your sources on TV. I just let people see my sources. But anyway.
Yeah, it was, again, that was Feline. My investigator dug out that information. So all kudos to Feline.
All right. Here's a third conspiratorial theory about the election. This was not about voters being shipped in to vote improperly. This was about voters disappearing so they couldn't vote. And you can see the slide here. Apparently, there's these three guys who somehow caused all of these men in Wisconsin to be abducted back in October before the election. And a lot of these people have just now started showing up back in Wisconsin, delivered home by Amazon personnel, you know, these people who do deliveries at the holidays and so forth. Extremely suspicious as far as I can tell. Another conspiracy. I mean, there's no end to this, apparently.
You know, Patron, in this case, we say that this voter is like the Thanos victim. You know, sometimes, again, she goes to extreme and poof, it's no more. And other times they come back. But you must wait and sit to the end credits, and you don't know, is Tony Stark dead?
Sometimes Big Lee spins yarns. I guess he's telling me the facts, but now I'm getting more confused. But one thing I know is in New York and California, and I heard this from somebody who believes it. I mean, somebody who knows what they're, well, I don't know if they know what they're talking. Anyway.
Boss, you got to remember when dealing with Big Lee is he does do what we like to call Lee drops. So you need to, there's secret messages encrypted in what he's saying. So it takes quite some skill.
I got that. I mean, one of them, he was asking me to pick up the tab on something else that Amazon delivered to his house. I got that. But you know, New York and California, these big liberal areas, they were going to go very big for Biden. So you know what happened? According to some theories, I'm just saying, I'm telling you what they say. In New York and California, Biden was going to win so handily that they loaned these other states that were more in play, they loaned them a whole bunch of votes that they didn't need. And you can see the picture here in the Buffalo Discusser of some people standing in line to vote. Now, one thing I don't understand, if you look at that picture, they have an arrow pointing to where this woman
Yeah, boss, that's how you know where their feet are. That's what that arrow's are all about.
Do they have a short photographer or something who can't get things in focus, or?
You know, I've heard tell, but I don't like to, spread conspiracies anymore.
Okay, well, the next time I see a picture with an arrow pointing to where the feet are, I'm sure I'm going to pay more attention. You know, some people voted this year on Facebook, or they used Alexa or something like that to vote. Well, there's a story on it in the Dallas Sacred Postulator. I noticed this right away. because some of these numbers were so large, you know, the Republicans kept saying there are more votes than there were people there at the polls. And what apparently happened is that these people voted, they thought, they were told on the internet by experts that they could vote online. And so they did. They didn't even vote with an absentee ballot or vote early. They just voted on, but you know something, this picture, do you see what I see? This is a picture of someone who looks like President Trump, and he's indicating the size of an anchovy found in his bed. I think that story must have been squelched because I haven't seen anything else about that.
Well, you know, I love the anchovy. You know, it is a small fish, right? You know, you can order with the foie gras and you can smear it all over yourself.
Well, and
Thanks, Leo.
it's interesting. We all know the anchovy is in fact a small fish, so it you know, his hands are to scale. So I think this is an actual authentic photo because his hands are somewhat smaller than an anchovy.
Are you saying he's not really a mammal, or are you saying he really is a mammal?
Well, I think the jury's still out on that. I think we need to do some more investigations to determine what.
Well, we're getting to juries in just a minute, but first, I want to tell you, you've probably heard the president, I mean, the last one, Trump, you probably heard him say, how can this be true? Because I was ahead at 10 o'clock. Well, a whole lot of his visionary supporters, should I call them that? They pointed to something on the internet. They said, this is from the Constitution. I think we have that slide here. They pointed to a part of the Constitution, and this was written so long ago that they're referring to devices that might be invented. And they say that if certain devices are invented, where the votes are going to be predicted, that whoever is ahead at 10 o'clock wins. But you know what's weird? This turns out not to be from the real Constitution. I mean, this is somebody's version of the Constitution that was printed on the internet. And it turns out, if you look at, well, if you listen to right-wing talk radio, and if you look at some of these sites that we're now being told about, where like Parler and so forth, where these people discuss things, I've seen things in the Constitution that I've never even heard of. So I'm going to take that with some grains of salt. I don't think it's the real Constitution that we're talking about.
I mean, it's clearly not. It's revisionist history, because the Constitution clearly states that it's 11:36 p.m. is the time I choose to cut off the votes, and not 10 o'clock. So this is clearly an urban legend of some sort.
And they didn't have daylight savings time back then, so we don't even know.
They barely had daylight back then, let alone daylight savings time.
Right. Well, final thought here, as we're thinking about the days of the election per se, and the days right after it. Trump, I mean, the former president. I don't know what we. Is that pretty good, Ann?
Hey, I was told that it is my right to take a lunch break when I need it. I'm here enjoying my salami sandwich.
Okay, all right, that'll be fine.
You got a better contract than the rest of us, Ann. I'm gonna.
Let's not talk.
We're gonna need to talk about this.
Just gotta ask for it, Ed.
Yeah, it was part of her deal. Otherwise, this is the only way I could get her to appear on air. She said she wasn't going to stop eating just to join us. Anyway, Trump had assumed that here is an employment opportunity here, a needed job thing. This was printed sometime before the election, and it asked for gun toters to sign up for this job. Apparently, I am told that the Trump organization believed that if they had enough armed watchers at the polls, that it would tell people what the right way to vote was, but it didn't work out that way. So I'm going to tell you that selection.
No, in France, Patron, in France, we look at these gun nuts like this is a child. Why must you wave your pee-pee around? We call them tota-tots. Fui! I spit ketchup on your tota-tots.
And I notice you don't have any tater tots to go with that salami.
Nah, I was kind of in a hurry, but yeah.
I
that
guess
would have
you
been
and
real
Big
good
Leo,
now that I think about it.
you and Big Leo are not speaking right now. Is that right?
Oh, not so much. No,
She has
we
better
had some
deals than
issues.
I. She eats all the time. What do I have? I have water. I have mouse. No food.
I'm actually
Well, I've
not.
got-
I'm not allowed to go anywhere near Tots, but that's story for another time. So.
Okay, let's look at what happened since the election. Now, first of all, there were some claims right away about lost ballots, and the first one that I heard was that there were ballots found near the Amazon basin. There's a news article here from the Seattle Spellbinder. You may have seen this, and the thing about it is, the confusion comes from this term Amazon basin because they weren't talking about a river in the jungle. What they were talking about is the Amazon headquarters, and there happens to be a drainage ditch set up there where apparently all of these Trump ballots were found. I mean, many thousands of them. In fact, we have that close up, don't we, of the basin. I mean, these days they're calling it the rabbit hole. At least that's what I heard Leo call it. And I can see how there would be a lot of ballots down there if they're true. But now, when all of these lawsuits were taking place, and Rudy Giuliani was in charge of most of these lawsuits, every one of these lawsuits, which they lost, by the way, and which is why Rudy is apparently not going to get paid, except that he has some residuals from Saturday Night Live or something, defending the president. But in all of these cases, when they went to court with these bogus lawsuits, they had to produce evidence, or so-called evidence. And we have a slide here. For example, this was an Exhibit 2 in one of the early lawsuits, and it pictures what looks like hundreds or thousands of ballots. And it says that they were found near the Great Wall. Okay, that if we were just looking at that one thing, I guess we would say, wow, look at all of those ballots. But look at this next exhibit slide here. This is Exhibit 6 in a different lawsuit that Rudy filed on behalf of the president. And it says that these ballots were found in the men's room of the Bob Doozy Hotel. But if you ask me, this is the same picture of the same ballots with a different description. And if you think I'm imagining all of this, look at this next slide. This is Exhibit 22 in yet another lawsuit. And here, and it's a picture of the same ballots, if you ask me, and it says that these are found at the St. Mildred, the Dancing Queen Church.
And you know what?
There's actually something. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, what? Well, I've worked with Giuliani in the past, and I found out through him on that last one. It turns out that ABBA was actually able to vote numerous times, and they are not even American.
No, they're not. But they do speak English, and
well, even
pretty
worse.
good, yeah.
Even worse, I think they're clearly they're members of the palindrome movement along with George Soros. So I mean, I think
ABBA. Yeah, that is the same. Frontward and back.
There's definitely some truth to those rumors that need to be
Well,
investigated.
And I am a French citizen, and I am not Russian, so I cannot vote in the American election.
I mean, there were a lot of people who said they couldn't vote in the election, and most of them, it turns out they did. They were just saying that,
Well,
even though.
Those were only the dead ones that I mean, they had more time in their hands. They were able to complain more that they weren't allowed to vote. So,
Well, we're going to get to dead people later. I mean,
okay.
because we're talking about the year in music where live music was not happening, but dead music wasn't happening either. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Look at this employment opportunity here. This is asking for people. Well, it's for actors, and apparently the reason that they needed actors is because for these lawsuits somebody had to file affidavits and then be deposed talking about so-called abuses at the polls or when they tried to vote. So for example, we've got a couple of these affidavits. Big Lee sent these to me without any explanation, but I can see what was going on. Here we have this affidavit from Gwendolyn Mooskirten. She says that she was approached by some big Democrats, you know, and they said they were going to set fire to her Volvo if she didn't vote the right way. And then she says in her affidavit that she was able to, well, punch them out with her flashlight. I don't know what that means, but it sounds pretty violent to me.
It happens.
Yeah. Look at it. We've got another affidavit here. This one is from Cecil Unami, or I think he calls it Unami. I've never been sure, but in Cecil's affidavit, he says that a group of Antifa supporters were threatening him, and they threatened him with tuning forks and magazine subscriptions. I can understand how that would be pretty terrifying. In any case, I've said this before, out of 50 suits, the plaintiffs, let's call them what they were not able to get any verdicts. I mean, most of the time they got thrown out of court, including when they went to Judge Judy, who said, you know, basically she said, I don't have time for this kind of clown suit thing. But anyway, the Electoral Junior College was the next thing that Rudy wanted to insert in this motif of rebellion. And there is another job opportunity posted here. This one,
you know, Patron, was very sad. It's after 9/11. Giuliani was like Europe's mayor. So now he's more like America's trained monkey. He's always throwing caca to see what sticks, you know, legal setting.
That's true. And that's why he wanted to hire some law students, because he needed to put together a slate of alternate electors for the Electoral Junior College, and that didn't go anywhere. Another thing that didn't go anywhere, right here in Texas, Governor Abbott wanted to give a special award because so many officials in Texas tried to stand up for the forces of the Republican mighty. Well, I shouldn't call it Republican mighty. I don't know what they call it. But in any case, in Texas, first you had Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor, offering lots of money for people who could find proof of electoral fraud. And then you had Ken Paxton filing a ridiculous lawsuit before the Supreme Court. I am told, I haven't actually seen the papers that they responded with, but I am told they gave him a D- on that particular suit to throw out 4 states' votes. And then Louis Gohmert wanted to prove he could be even more ridiculous than Ken Paxton. And then Ted Cruz said, I'm going to have a few things. Anyway, Governor Abbott wanted to give an award to these tall Texans. He was looking at what he could call them. I think he played with 4 on the floor. And then he was going to call it foregone conclusions. But I think the
I wrote to Monsieur Abbott. I proposed he should call him is an award to Mon Chéri Abhor.
I bet that's what made him back down. I think, if I understand what Bigley was just telling us there.
Mon Chéri Abhor, or something like
Right.
that.
That again, that was a very sophisticated lead drop that I'm going to have to go over the recording and find out what he was
Yeah,
really
there
trying to
was
tell us.
there was something hidden in there because it didn't push any of my buttons, and usually it does. Anyway, while all this was going on, you know what Trump was doing? He was making money with his campaign story. He was telling people he needed money. We've got a letter here from the Trump-Pence campaign. The reason we have these, another of my investigators signed up to get all of these emails from the campaign just so we could keep our eyes on things. And in one of these, the president is saying, the ex-president is saying that he won the election by 75 million votes, and then he's asking me for money. So just to see what was going on, I did buy a few things. For example, here's a kneecap. Do we have a picture of that? I got this kneecap. It looks like a mask you would use. You would put it on your face because of the pandemic, but it's got that Trump-Pence insignia, and I guess you're supposed to wear it on your knee. They also have a CD for sale. This is called I Light Up Your Life. There's some things on here that, I mean, these are cheesy renditions of a bunch of old standards, like the one I really like, I'm dreaming of a white country, and even more. I mean, they are monumental. Then I received an email, or actually my investigator received an email talking about the giant blenders that they are almost out of, and the Trump campaign was offering to sell me one for $16,000, which I didn't really have 16,000 sitting around, but you can see a picture of this 10-foot high blender. It was called the Thumper, the Trumper Thumper, and I guess the idea was that you throw your I don't want to say enemies, the people who disagree with you, you have a place to put them and really mix it up. The other thing the president...
I'm thinking I could find another use for one of them, so I'm going to look into that, just saying.
Okay, well, I was only able to come up with 3,000 or 4,000, but I think we can say that we'll take one of those reserved ones. And
I think there's a strong possibility we could convert that into a machine that would count votes. So, and at a far less...
Actually, I should have looked at the back of it. I think it does say Astro Dominion on there somewhere. Maybe they just converted them. Anyway, when the president wasn't selling things, he was out playing golf. And, you know, I think once again, setting a bad example. But Ed, you tell me that... You know,
yeah, my researchers, especially feline again, have looked into it, and there's enzymes produced when you play golf that confer some sort of immunity. But what we found out is Donald Trump has a very high level of immunity, because it's not the actual golf that causes the enzymes. It's the actual kicking of the ball out of the rough or kicking the ball into the cup. So at first glance you think it's golf, but it's actually the kicking motion that brings
you know what
in.
Ed's right, because you know what, Phil Mickelson, that guy is loaded with antibodies. I have it on good source.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy, I bet you all didn't know that out there, dear colleagues across town and across the globe. The other thing the president so healthy, playing golf. When he wasn't playing golf, the president was figuring out what he would do about presidential pardons. Now, I know his advisors said, you should go in there and pardon good people, fine people on both sides. But apparently the president said, no, I'm just going to pardon people who did criminal things so that I can keep them out of jail. And then he, on reflection, he decided to pardon the Pope. Now, this was a weird move. He was saying, I'm going to pardon you for your irrational statements about the environment and our need to respect the environment. Like, where do you get off, Francis? You know?
Yeah, no, he wants to pardon the Pope that he's not Catholic. I think the Americans should have bought the whole idea.
I hadn't thought about that. One thing I did think about, though, after he thought about pardons for a while, two things came up. One, he said another way to make money would be to sell these. And I think he got an offer to buy some pardons from a guy named Eric at a place called Backwater. We've got that letter, don't we? Or is it an email? Whatever it is, they're saying they could use some pardons, and I guess they got some. But then he decided that some people, I really can't pardon them, but what I can do is give them medals to distract from the fact that they should be in jail. So you can see this article in the Chattanooga Cheerleader that we've got, where the president just bestowed, I guess that's the right word, bestowed the Medal of Freedom on Mr. Nunez and Mr. Jordan in the House of Representatives and the Senate, respectively. And it did kind of distract attention, but what it can't distract attention from is the fact that the president now has to decide whether he'll try to pardon himself. Now, a lot of constitutional scholars, they tell me, and they've told my investigators, no, he cannot pardon himself, okay? Since he cannot pardon himself, he's got to figure some way to deal with his liability for things that he may have done, which some people would characterize as criminal. So if you want to know the truth about it, I think you need to look at this article we've got here. Well, it's actually a book. It's not an article. It started off as an article and it was expanded to a book. It's a book about Grump. We have that slide, don't we, showing the book? Well, here's the thing. This guy named Grump, who looks almost identical to Donald Trump, started showing up all over Washington, D.C. in the last little while. And I think it's the same guy who said there was an anchovy in his bed. But the point is, Trump seems to be talking to his advisors who are telling him that he should say there was an evil twin, Mr. Grump Trump, who is the one responsible for all of this criminal activity. And even though the president can't pardon himself, he can pardon Grump. And then that will leave him with so-called clean slate. Is that the way y'all understand it? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I think there's a legal concept known as similar to herd immunity that he confuses when he talks about the pandemic. There's something called grump immunity. So you can actually, if you're a grumpy person, you're allowed to have immunity because they don't want grumpy people in jails. It just stirs up all the inmates and causes unrest. So that's my understanding.
Yeah, it really messes up craft day. It does.
Well, I think that's why one of the other songs on that CD was Grump, which it was based. It seems like a mashup of one of those Van Halen tunes, which is like Grump. But anyway, that says it was in the works for some time before we heard anything about it, and we usually hear about these things before anybody else.
Well, I did have catch wind of that, boss, some time ago with Feline, but as you know, till I can verify it with 2 independent sources, I don't bring it to you. So
I
perhaps
understand, and I respect that. Well, another thing, Trump has been saying he would refuse to sign the defense authorization, and I think there's a couple of reasons. One, he wanted a provision there in the defense authorization to muzzle Facebook and Twitter. And the way I understand the story is he mismanaged this because a lot of people in Congress were willing to put a muzzle on Facebook, but it was just kind of a style issue. They had a
Yeah.
different muzzle in
They
mind.
were arguing over the style of the muzzle, and you know, he didn't like it. You know, Facebook was trying to get it off a Wish, and Donald wanted a gold one, and it was just, yeah, that's kind of where it all went off the rails.
Well, it's
Okay.
interesting. A gold muzzle actually would help with the virus. There's some evidence. My investigators tell me that there's a catalytic type effect. It almost acts as a molecular sieve device, so that the viruses, being very small particles, are kept out while the oxygen is allowed in. It's sort of a reverse molecular sieve, is my understanding.
Well,
So
you're
Ed, could I use my coffee filter like that? Because I got one of those gold plated ones. You know, could I just
Only
like, put
only
it
if
over
it's
the nose?
only if it still has remnants of decaffeinated coffee in it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Y'all are
because-
starting to
Okay.
sound like Big Lee to me. I mean, that's just French to me.
Well,
Anyway,
he's influential. I got to give it to the guy. He's real influential.
I'll tell you another thing.
Merci.
Another thing is
Beaucoup.
Trump was not going to sign the defense authorization bill because he was mad about changing the names of some military bases that were named after Confederate generals. And I guess
there was one I think they were going to change. I can't remember which one to Fort Rosie O'Donnell, and that was a big mess.
well, it certainly didn't happen, but they overruled him. They said no veto here. We're going to pass this defense authorization bill. So there we go. One thing that's happened already is that the president has made clear he's leaving D.C. for Florida. We've got a picture, don't we, from the National Security Administration. Took a picture. I think they were throwing out some mattresses. It's kind of hard to tell whether this is Trump's or Melania's. I know they have different mattresses.
Separate.
Yeah, separate. Yes, that's what I'm getting at, Leo. And once again, we see an arrow in this picture, but it's not talking about feet. This one is talking about some sort of a screen protector. And it has something to do with Grump Trump. We'll have to look into that more, but we think that's suspicious. Trump went to Florida, by the way, at the holidays. He was going to have a New Year's party, and a lot of people bought tickets. They were pretty disappointed. We even bought a couple of tickets to the bash, because we were going to get in. But what happened was that he apparently left on a plane, and all these people who ponied up the big bucks didn't get to see him because he went. Does anybody?
There's actually my sources telling me that what happens is he likes to use the bathroom on Air Force One because it has the gold-plated toilets with the presidential seal, and so that's really why he left early. And he really he constantly irritates Melania and Ivanka by leaving early. He's just known as an early leaver. So there's some source of friction between the three of them.
I guess then he got on the plane and he said, we may as well go back because we're already on the plane, huh?
That's true. And unlike Ann's business, I believe this Air Force One is actually flying. Is that correct? Or is it also in the stationary airline business?
Well, I think I think they're looking into putting it into the stationary airline business pretty soon.
I thought it was a hologram.
Oh, you might be thinking of Air Force Number 2, which goes back to yeah.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yes, I think
that's the one with the nice bathroom.
Do they have good French wine on Air Force One? Does anyone know, Leo? Do they?
Myself, I always prefer the Air Force #2. I mean, you produce it from the Air Force #1, recycle to the Air Force #2.
Yeah, that covers it. We're getting close to the present tense here as we go through these, but there was one last act here in this going away presidency, and that was the Georgia runoff with control of the Senate, and then a coup that followed it as Congress attempted to certify the results. So the first thing that happened here before the runoff in Georgia was that the president sort of gave a bribe to the voters. And there's a story in the Tulsa Talker that covers it pretty good. He was promising everybody a check for $2,000 if the Republicans held on to the Senate, but they didn't. You know very well that in Georgia, both of the Democratic candidates came out victorious. And one reason they did is that they decided to make that race very interesting by turning both races into sporting events. So, for example, in the Decatur Doodler, a headline right after the runoff says that Warnoff defeated the Braves with a walk-off homer, and Ossoff wins with a TKO over Leffler. It was a very, very, very creative way to bring more voters into the runoff, and it worked to their advantage. Now, the morning after that, Trump apparently was not feeling very well. We got an email from his campaign. This is really pretty amazing. I've read it a couple of times, but I'm going to read part of it again. I just like reading this. He's basically saying, now we have to show what we're made of. And he says he is made of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and well, you know what? So am I. I mean, so are all of us. That's what we're made of. But it sounds like
plus it does neglect the puppy dog tails. So I think that's probably an important. The puppy dog tails are a trace element in many of us. So I would like to see that.
Forget the snails, right? The escargot. Where's the snails?
I was going to ask you to elaborate, but I knew that Big Lee would say something, and he did. So thanks, Leo. Anyway, I remember sitting down that morning to watch the certification vote, and I thought things might be a little different than in regular years. So I got out my brand new copy of Robert's Rules of Order for the Trump era. For the Trump era. And you know what's interesting is that there was a section in there that even says, in the event of an insurrection, and then it says that the chairman of the meeting can suspend the speakers. So anyway, I had a book to guide me through watching this, and I watched while people broke the windows to get into the, and you know who else watched that? President Trump watched that, because we've got a letter. Well, I'm not sure. I think it was an email. It's one that he sent to the General Services Administration on the morning of the 6th of January. And he's telling the maintenance man that one of his supporters who was touring the Capitol accidentally broke some windows. And so he's volunteering to pay for them. And he says the check will be good, you know, because he's got a whole lot of money.
Yeah, just ask Giuliani about his checks bouncing. I think think there's a story to be told there.
I was going to mention that. You know, that didn't stop some Republicans from continuing to rebel against the certification. One of them being our own ringmaster, Ted Cruz, and the response to that was pretty quick. You probably noticed the story in the Pasadena Punctuator. The Republicans announced a cruise control program And that's going on right now. And it didn't take very long. I think just a matter of hours, maybe a day or two, before the people on the right, I'm looking for the right thing to call them, produced a documentary for Netflix, which is saying that, and it's called "Making the Case." Antifa imitates the base, and they're suggesting in this documentary, with some nice video and stuff, that it was actually Antifa who infiltrated the base, who were peacefully touring the Capitol. So,
Well, boss, let me tell you, Antifa was in fact there, and she's my neighbor. Anne is a really sweet lady. She's like a little gray-haired lady, very motherly and all that. She has a little dog who's adorable. I call him Doodle Boots because he kind of always goes on his feet. You know, he's sort of old, and so, yeah, he's just. But she's real sweet. I've had Thanksgiving with her before, and she was there because she texted me pictures. Well, her nephew
well,
did.
thank you for that detail. I didn't know we had that many sources that would confirm things like that for us. I just want to cover a couple more things because we're getting close to the end. You know that Facebook and Twitter, social media, responded to all of this by cutting off the president. You've got the notice there. We have a copy of the notice that was sent by the social media. When you tried to get into that Twitter account or that Facebook account, it says that it's been moved to the trash bin of history. And the people in the cabinet were deserting at such a rate that now you see this CNN bulletin. Now the few remaining cabinet officers have lots of functions, like the president's secretary of defense, state, agriculture, and education was going to be interviewed just after.
Yeah.
Anyway,
my sources tell me, boss, that he's so upset about being cut off because it brings back traumatic memories, because both Melania and Ivanka cut him off years ago. So he's very sensitive to being cut off.
okay.
My
Patron, I
sources.
think we ourselves are about to be cut off, you know? And maybe you have final questions.
I'm going to tell you, folks, we wanted to talk about business in 2021, but we just don't have time. Just covering the events between November and now took all that time. So we hope you're ready for a change of pace, because one is coming. And we hope that in 2021, you will come back and visit us when we go live on the air here on Houston Media Source to bring you the stories behind the stories behind the stories. And all of my people want to say happy 2021 to all of you folks out there. Bye-bye.
Yeah.